So today's digital midrash is in Esther Rabbah. We're still theoretically in the introduction. This is Parasha Aleph. So technically, it's not necessarily by Prachim, the parasha. Nor does it correspond to the Parashat Torah. You have the midrash on every week's parasha, but the parashot are just like chapters in the midrash. So it's the introduction to Esther Rabbah, Parasha Aleph. Look where it says Chet, Siman Chet, the Chet with the surrounded by parentheses.
Yep.
Okay. Now, do you want to give it a try?
At the top of the page.
The right column, 4 lines from the bottom. 5 lines from the bottom.
Okay.
Rabbi Akiva.
Rabbi Akiva,
היה?
רבי עקיבא היה יושב ודורש
נתנמנמו.
נתנמנמו התלמידים.
So Rabbi Akiva was sitting and teaching. ונתנמנמו התלמידים. His תלמידים started to fall asleep. It happens. I wasn't the first one.
באה לערערה יתאון.
So he desired to wake them up.
אמר מה זכתה אסתר למלוך על
127.
או על 120 שנה מדינה. אלא כך אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, תבוא אסתר, בתה של שרה, שחייתה 120 שנה.
127
שנה, ותמלוך על 127 מדינה.
יפה, very simple. Rabbi Akiva is sitting and teaching. His students are falling asleep. He wants to wake them up. What does he do? So he says, what zechut did Esther have to rule over 127 nations? She's the queen, right? Ad chatzia malchut. She's literally entitled to up to half of the kingdom. So what was her merit? What was her zechut that she rules over 127 nations? Elakach amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But rather, here's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said: Tavo Esther bitah shel Sarah. Let Esther come, the daughter, so to speak, of Sarah, who lived for 127 years. V'timloch al 127 medina. She should rule over 127 nations.
And so
because of
Achashverosh had twice as much. That's what it is. Achashverosh had twice as much.
No. I mean, she was the queen. Let's say she was half.
Yeah.
She had half of the access to, or half the kingship of these 127 nations, right? This isn't the Zohar Kadosh that we just read. This is a midrash. Every child has access to this midrash. So, a couple of interesting questions one would be inclined to ask. Question number 1: what on earth, but really, do Sarah and Esther have to do with each other? You're talking about a difference in time of about maybe 1,100 years. 1,200 years. What could they possibly have to do with each other? Why is Esther was the only descendant that Sarah had? What does the number of years that Sarah lived have to do with the number of countries or nations under Achashverosh's kingdom?
Well, how come it's the same number? Because there's a reason.
Because it's the same number, there has to be an explanation. Maybe the numbers 2, 5, 10 appear all over the Torah. That's it. Everything is related. Generally speaking, we look for connections where we can find them. This is a little bit abstract, you'll agree. We've seen things that make a connection between this person, this time period, that time period, this word, that word. Here, the Midrash isn't learning from a word. It's not analyzing a word. It's analyzing a number. Midrash shouldn't do this. So we have a number. What's the number? 127. Any other questions you have about this Midrash before we adjourn for tonight?
Well, what we don't have as questions, that's pretty much what it is. Why you want to wake people up? Why do you talk to them about that? Just shout or do something like that.
Why are they falling asleep? Why does the Midrash come packaged this way? Why are Rabbi Akiva's students falling asleep? No offense to him or to his Talmidim. If I were listening to Rabbi Akiva teach, I would probably have tried to pay attention to the best of my ability. Why are students falling asleep?
And why should that wake them
up? Why is he trying to wake them up? And why is this
right.
going to wake them up? Because you know how to count to 127. Because at a gap of 1,000 years, there's another issue with the number 127. So it's not a very common number, 127. It's not that it appears everywhere in the Torah. Just because you made this connection, all of a sudden the students are inspired to wake up.
Maybe it's something that is so deep that he doesn't want to share it with people who are asleep, and will only share it with the people who are still awake. So he's not really trying to wake them up. But
it's something so deep that he refuses to share it with anyone who's awake.
No, with anyone who's sleeping.
But they're sleeping now.
Yeah, no. So some are sleeping, but not everyone is sleeping.
In other words, you're saying this is what he wants to say.
He's filtering out only for the guys who are really listening.
It's like the guys who wake up are the ones that are going to merit hearing this, and the guys that don't wake up are
maybe something like that.
All right. Well, apparently he believes this has the capacity to wake them up. I don't know why this should be the case. We'll have to try to figure out.
But also, it doesn't really answer the question that he asked itself.
Which is?
He asked what was her zechut, that to rule over 127.
Well, if you think about it, okay, in both cases, I don't know that the number was a crucial factor in their lives. Meaning, Sarah lived 127 years before she passed away. Would it have made a big difference if it was 125 or 130? Okay, you got a precise number. No one can accuse you of rounding up or down because 127 is 127. It is what it is. Would it have mattered if Ahasuerus was the king over 126 nations? Like, nation 127 makes a big difference to him? He cares? Can he count that many nations every day? What's the big difference? The detail is included by Esther like it's included by Sarah. I would maybe say that by Sarah it's maybe a little bit more significant because the Torah always counts how long someone lived. If they're people of import, someone of significance, chances are the Torah will tell you how long Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov lived, how long Sarah lived. We don't have a number for Rivka or Leah or Rachel, but Sarah, apparently there is something to this 127. Very interesting as far as Midrashim go, because this is about as abstract as they get. This would be something you would say you'd pull out of the Zohar Kadosh. I was reading the Zohar, and the Zohar says 127 here, 127 there, just like here this, so too there that. Okay, you can argue with the Zohar Kadosh. It's a midrash, and this midrash appears at least twice. Once it appears by Esther, once it appears by Sarah, by Chai Sarah. We don't know what the effect of this drasha was. In other words, we don't have the continuation of the midrash.
We don't know if they could actually woke them up.
Maybe some of them did. Maybe some of them didn't. Maybe that's also part of the point. Fascinating concept, though, the way it appears. So, Rabbi Akiva sees his students are falling asleep. Chances are, if his students are falling asleep, if he had to draw any conclusions about the curriculum, what do you think he would say?
He would say maybe that's not really interesting for them.
Maybe I was teaching them something they weren't very much into. Maybe it wasn't something that was super exciting to them, etc.
Or maybe I was teaching them for too long. It can be the end of the day. It could be the morning and they
teaching
were
them for too
learning all
long.
night.
The solution to that situation is let them go. Yeah, done for the day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Batla, we're on vacation. We're on a break. So, if he felt he was teaching them too much, he probably would have adjourned, let them go. Apparently, he's a little bit disappointed in their attentiveness, and he's saying, okay, maybe it's me, maybe it's the material. So he goes on to something a little bit more abstract. Assuming that something more abstract is a little bit deeper, and it requires more active thought, it requires more involvement on their part. And so they start thinking. What's the significance of 127, the way it appears by Sarah, by the way? You guys remember this? It's a very basic midrash. Rashi quotes it.
Yeah, it's broken down 120.
100 shana, or 20 shana, or 7 shana.
And then when she was 7, she was like, when she was 20, she was innocent like when she was 7. And when she was
100, she was as beautiful as when she was 20 or something?
No, when she was a string, she was like wise as when she was
100, and when she was
100,
she was still beautiful like when she was 20. I mean, there's a significance to each number.
right.
7 as innocence, she's not even a major yet, so nothing she did, no avirot anyway, could possibly have any negative influence. 20 is associated with beauty.
Right.
Okay, so already a smack in the face to the pedophiles who are expecting girls to be teenagers. 20 is considered a perfectly normal age for a woman to be at the peak of her beauty, which is fine. And 100 connotes accomplishment. She's lived a long life. In fact, there's another midrash that you may or may not be familiar with. It happens to appear in the midrash, also expounded upon the Zohar Kadosh, that Avraham and Sarah zekenim ba'im bayamim. Hadar lihot l'Sarah orach kanashim. We're told when this concept of infertility is introduced to us, we're told that Avraham and Sarah are both zekenim. They're both elderly. Ba'im bayamim, and we don't find that expression very much in the Torah. It's also kind of an exceptional way of putting things. So, ba'im bayamim, what does it mean? Literally, it means they're coming in days, or they've come into many days. They've experienced a lot of them. So the Zohar says, zikinim, I understand, they're old. Ba'im bayamim, what does it mean? It means, the Zohar says, first of all, that they have, that every single day has a challenge to it. Every single day you have to do all the mitzvot. At least all the mitzvot that pertain to you and that pertain to this day. Nonetheless, every single day, the Zohar says, has a unique or particular challenge, and your ability to withstand this unique or particular challenge or to accomplish this particular task will determine if this day testifies on your behalf or testifies against you come the time for judgment. So what's the Zohar's explanation? Ba'im bayamim, it's not only that they're zekenim, meaning that they've lived through a lot of days. Ba'im bayamim, they have all the days that they lived. They all testify, these people accomplished, these people were active, these people were fastidious, they were hardworking, devoted, dedicated, they withstood challenges, and they kept on working even into their old age. So it's not just that they've lived through a lot of days, it's that they lived up to the maximum, that they maximized they exercised their potential, they realized their potential on each and every day of their lives. So 127, in terms of Sarah and her accomplishment, tell us not only did she reach the ripe old age of 127, she was accomplished at 127 because each and every day that she lived to the maximum. Okay, so it's more than just a technical number. Age is just a number, as I say. It's more than a number. It's actually, there's a degree of accomplishment here. We're testifying to not just the volume of days, but also to the density, the content, so to speak. When it comes to Hashverosh and Esther, there is seemingly no significance to the number. And you would say, okay, so by Sarah, the number has meaning, it has significance, and by Esther, it is not. Then the question becomes more difficult. If you were to tell me 127 means this by Sarah, and it means this by Esther, I would tell you, okay, so here it has a meaning, here it has a meaning, and then there's like another layer of meaning that we can superimpose on the two of them, and we can say maybe there's a connection. The connection is more compelling when one instance, one source, gives you expressly, explicitly, the significance of these numbers. There's 100, there's 20, there's 7. There's the concept of her living her entire 127 with fulfillment and achievement. By Esther, there's no reason. It doesn't matter what the number is. He could have been the king over the 5 biggest countries in the world at the time, and he would have been an accomplished man. It could have been 20, it could have been 100, 120, 127, is that much? But there's no really compelling reason that we first of all need this number. It doesn't appear again in the Megillah. It's not like he gained or lost countries in the process. And it seems like it's almost an insignificant detail. So here's what Rabbi Akiva telling you. This detail here that seems really insignificant actually relates back to something very significant.
So because even the question itself assumes that it's a zechut that she got there. If you think about it, I mean, she doesn't really care about being a queen. She doesn't really exercise any power. If anything, she got into that not pleasant situation. And the only zechut that she has is that through that she could save the Jewish people. That's the zechut, not the fact that she has 127 Medina. That is really relevant because she's not looking for power, she's not operating. Actually, she's powerless.
So you could make the argument that however many countries he ruled over, she would have been able to rule over too. She was indifferent. The fact that it's a very large and very impressive number is even more impressive because you would say maybe there was a better candidate for this position. Vashti probably enjoyed the publicity, the paparazzi, the Vogue magazine. She would have benefited or profited more from the exposure, as opposed to Esther was no interest in this. She didn't become the queen because she was interested in becoming famous or popular, because she's interested in exercising power over all of these people. So the number itself is impressive. It's even more impressive because she didn't even want it. It's not like she went around looking for it, it just happened upon her. And that raises a whole other question, right? What zichut does she have?
Right.
He calls this zichut. Zichut in Hebrew, we would say, we would tend to translate
She
merit.
did something good.
What did she do? What did she do? She was married to Mordechai. She wasn't, she didn't have her hat in the ring. She didn't send out resumes. This wasn't a job search. On the contrary, if anything, she would have been perfectly happy not to be the queen. In the end, I'm sure she realizes this is, which is, by the way, we'll talk about that too, because Mordechai points this out to her. There's a reason why this happened. But she herself, zichut, what did she do in her childhood that this became something of meaning or significance for her in adulthood? How could you call this a reward, so to speak, for something that she did? We don't know what it is that she did. We're not told anything about it, just that she's an orphan. Mordechai raised her. Eventually he married her. That's not explicit in the Megillah, that appears in the Talmud. And the fact that she is taken into this position against her will sounds contrary to the idea that this is a merit, this is some kind of a payment. If I go to work for a month, I get a paycheck at the end of the month, you can say it's my zichut. I worked, I earned it, I deserved it, this is what I get paid, and I'm taking it home. If you take me out of my house, you kidnap me, you force me to work somewhere, and then you come and you give me something at the end of the month, this is a zichut, this is a merit. My merit would have been I don't have to deal with you. Why would I ever want to see you again? And Rabbi Akiva calls this zichut. No, this is zichut. Don't misunderstand. It's by all means a merit of hers. And in fact, what's the merit that she has? Because she's somehow related to Sarah, she has the merit of the number 127, which makes perfect sense. You can end the class here. So a little bit of an excursion. Very famous question the Gemara asks on the topic of zichut, on the topic of merit, rewards and punishments. The famous question, how come you have a tzaddik v'ralo and a rasha v'tovlo? Why do we have righteous men who suffer and we have wicked men who prosper? And one of the answers proffered up by the Gemara, easy. You don't know what this person does in private. You don't know what this person does in secret. Maybe this tzaddik that you think is suffering so badly isn't a tzaddik gamur. There's something he or she is doing wrong, and they're getting punishment for it now because they would rather leave Olam Hazeh with a clean account. So I suffered in Olam Hazeh so that nothing should be withheld from me in Olam Haba. And maybe this rasha that you think is someone really evil, someone really wicked, I think we spoke about this last week or the week before, maybe he's not an absolute and total complete rasha by all accounts. It's entirely possible this person has some kind of a merit. Most of what he or she does is evil, wicked, corrupt, etc. So they'll be excluded from Olam Haba, but they'll get the reward in Olam Hazeh. So although most of their actions would merit other treatment, you're missing part of the picture. What part of the picture? Rashi explains beautifully that everyone gets their reward in the world that's most important to them. So the tzaddik lives, maybe even suffers through Olam Hazeh. Why? Because really he knows that he wants his reward in Olam Shekulo Tov. He wants to be in a world of permanence, a world of eternity, a world where his merits and his good deeds continue to pay dividends infinitely. Why would a tzaddik want his reward in Olam Hazeh when he's only going to be here for a certain period of time? I can spend it now, I can spend it later. The Rasha, on the contrary, doesn't live for Olam Hazeh, for Olam Haba. He only lives for Olam Hazeh. This is the only world that's important to him. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, no problem. That's the way you want to play. I'll make you a deal. You get to eat all of your merits in Olam Hazeh, and the punishment you'll give in a world that's more permanent, a world that's more infinite. But you get to choose where you want the reward divided out. This is one answer given by the Gemara. There's another one, and it's a lot less understood, and perhaps a little bit less discussed. And there, the Gemara says, Tzaddik v'ralo, tzaddik ben rasha, rasha v'tovlo, rasha ben tzaddik. Which sounds easy enough. Tzaddik v'ralo, so you find someone who is righteous, and he has it tough in life, he has it bad. Tzaddik ben rasha. Maybe he's a tzaddik now, but his father must have been a rasha. Why would his father be a rasha? Well, Maybe he inherited some bad habits. Maybe he inherited some something negative about his routine. Maybe some of his attitudes are a little bit crooked because of his father. So maybe it's a little bit more abstract than you can observe with your own.
Isn't there a concept that we're not supposed to suffer from the sin that nobody is supposed to pay for the sins of someone else, like they say in another religion?
The pasuk you're looking for is lo yumatu avot al banim, uvanim lo yumatu al avotam, ish b'chet'o yumatu. So fathers cannot be executed because of their children. Children cannot be executed because of their fathers. Ish b'chet'o yumatu. You can only be executed. Capital punishment can only be exacted from you for your own chet, for something you did wrong. So if that's the case, then forgive me for interrupting, but maybe it's not fair that we have this pasuk that we say in the 13 midot of rachamim, notzar chesed l'arafim. So it's fair that you enjoy the merit of your forefathers, but there's no such concept by the punishment. If you're invested, if you're a part of the family tree, so if your forefather did something wrong, you suffer, and if they did something right, you prosper, you merit. You're telling me, no, I only want the good, I don't want the bad.
It's not that you get only the good and not the bad. It's that the bad is delayed, but it's going to happen eventually.
But it's going to happen to me because of something that he did?
No. No, go ahead.
No, that's the question. Where's the bad is the justice?
So,
where's
someone
the justice?
did someone bad?
With the really, I truncated the quotation because the rest of the pasuk, "Notzar chesed alafim, poked awon avot, al banim, al shileshim, ve'al ribeim." So Hashem does punish for up to not just the individual himself, but children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. You're talking about 4 generations, meaning the one who committed the crime, and 3 generations further. Maybe this is, Onkelos translates right away, it's not that automatically my great-grandfather did something wrong on another continent, and now I'm going to get punished because of this, but rather, my great-grandfather might have done something wrong, and if I perpetuate this iniquity, if I adopted or I inherited this bad attitude, bad behavior, bad words, bad reactions, whatever it is, then I get punished more severely than someone else in this situation would have been punished. Why? Because I had a negative example to learn from, and I failed to learn from it. I should have known better. I should have known how if he mistreated my great-grandmother, how much suffering and how much anxiety it causes, and then for me to treat my wife like this is even more reprehensible. Tell me, God doesn't know we got involved in drugs and alcohol and painkillers, whatever. But you know you had a negative example and you refused to learn from it. You deserve to be punished more than anyone else. Okay, so that's Onkelos explains this way. So tzaddik ben rasha would be a tzaddik whose father maybe was a rasha and he absorbed some of it. So somehow in a way that you don't know, that you don't understand, there's something wrong. How radically different is this from a tzaddik she'eno gamur, an incomplete or imperfect tzaddik? Maybe he looks to you like a tzaddik, but on the inside or in secret, there must be in private something he does that merits punishment. Here the Gemara says, as if this is a totally different answer. No, it could be that maybe he is a perfect tzaddik. That would be the difference. He's a perfect tzaddik, but because of something, somewhere, in his father's biography, it just works out such. He gets punished. Conversely, you have the Rasha. And the Rasha, Ben Tzaddik, he's a Rasha. If the other opinion held, Rasha she'eno gamur, he's getting rewarded or he's living well because there must be something he's doing that merits some kind of a reward. It could be in this case that he is a Rasha gamur, even a Rasha gamur, except that his father was a Tzaddik. And maybe there's some kind of an attitude, some kind of an aspect, some kind of a something that he picked up, or a mitzvah that he does, everyone else does it, but he does it with a little bit more kavanah, I don't know. That seems to be the opinion. Enter the Arizal, who doesn't hold this way, and explains a little bit differently. Tzaddik, she'eno gamur, and Rasha, she'eno gamur, that's self-explanatory. If you're a tzaddik, it's one thing. If you're anything less than a tzaddik, how can you complain about a punishment you have coming to you, Da'olam hazeh, when you know you did something wrong? So if I were perfect, I can stand up and say, Akadosh Baruch Hu, I want my money back. Take these Yisurim, I don't deserve it, give it to someone who does. If you're a tzaddik gamur, who can dare to say such a thing? Nobody. You have a pasuk in Kohelet, Adam ben tzaddik ba'aretz ya'aseh tov v'lo yacheta. There's no such thing as a man who comes to Olam Hazeh, only does good, never does bad. So, Tzaddik Sheno Gamur, Rasha Sheno Gamur, I get it. Tzaddik Ben Rasha, the Arizal explains, Kabbalistically speaking, when you refer to a father and a son, very often this is a code word for a previous lifetime and a current lifetime. So what's called your father, quote unquote, would be the Gilgul, to use the terminology, that preceded this one. And all of a sudden the question is asked and answered very differently. Here's a guy who is righteous, and he suffers, and his suffering is inexplicable. I don't know. Look at the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. Chazal make a very astonishing admission where they say, "En biadenu lo misurei hatzadikim, en biadenu lo mishalvat harasha'im, v'af lo misurei hatzadikim." Literally, they say, we don't have in our hands, which is a way of saying we don't have a limud that we can refer to that does justice to this concept of the peace, the serenity of the Rashaim, or the suffering of the tzaddikim. If you don't have a teaching, then don't say anything. And then the Mishnah comes out and says, no, you should know. It's one of these undefined concepts that we don't have a Mishnah for. So what they're telling you, the Rizal explains, is not that we don't have any teachings on this concept. We don't have anything at the level of the Mishnah that can explain this. We have other teachings, but it's not for here. So Pirkei Avot has a little bookmark, and the bookmark says, you want to know about the suffering of the tzaddikim and about the prosperity of the Rashaim, the serenity of the Rashaim, we can't help you here. Go somewhere else if you want answers to questions like this. It's deeper than what the Mishnah gets into. So he explains, Tzaddik ben Rasha, maybe he's a tzaddik. If he's a tzaddik sheno gamur, maybe he's being punished for something he did wrong now. He's a nice guy, but he gambles. He buys lottery tickets. I don't know, he does something he shouldn't be doing. So this is already questionable. If he's a tzaddik gamur, it's still possible that he's getting punished in Olam Hazeh. Why? Because the last time he was here, or if you will, the Av, the Gilgul that begat the current Gilgul. In other words, the situation out of which he created the current situation, this previous Gilgul was problematic. Maybe he was a wife beater, maybe he was a gambler, maybe an alcoholic, maybe a thief, maybe who knows. Now you see the guy and you say, that's impossible. He's a perfect total tzaddik. I would set my clock according to him. I would swear up and down, this is the most righteous man that I know. And you might be right. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, out of nothing but mercy, explains the Arizal, chose not to punish him in Olam Haba, where the punishment would be eternal, or where whatever he loses from his merits would be an eternal loss, but rather he punishes him here in Olam Hazeh, where it's temporal, in order that he can finish his Gilgul, the current one, and benefit from the full portion of what he deserves in Olam Haba. So as a favor to him, as a service to him, we're servicing his debt. He pays a little bit of it now, and this way he doesn't have to pay it in the future in perpetuity. Rasha ben Tzaddik. How do you have a serene Rasha, a peaceful Rasha? This, explains the Arizal, would be a Rasha who in a previous Gilgul was a Tzaddik. If he were perfect, he wouldn't have to come back. Even so, maybe the generation needs him. There's other reasons why somebody might come back. But this Rasha, now he's a Rasha. The way we see him and the way we interact with him and the way he interacts with people, he's a Rasha. But it could be that he's still receiving the merit of a previous Gilgul. And it's true, the Gemara says, Midat HaChesed is 500 times stronger than Midat HaDin because the same pasuk tells us only 4 generations for punishments, whereas 2,000 alafim, the minimum is at least 2,000. In order for it to be thousands, it's at least 2,000. And so yes, your good deeds, your good merits, your mitzvot, will last you far into the future. Unfortunately, the unfortunate decisions that we make can cost us dearly, even if it's over a relatively short period of time, a short span of time. So it's bizarre that Rabbi Akiva should use the term bitah in referring to Esther, telling us that Esther is the daughter of Sarah. He could say Tze'etzaeha, her descendants, Mizra'ah, she's from the same seed, from the same family. There's a dozen different expressions that he could have used. He uses the term bitah, to say this is her daughter. And it's very bizarre because you don't find it very often that you're referring to someone more than one generation away as a son or a daughter. But all of a sudden it starts to make sense in a different light. So what zechut would Esther have if she's ruling now over 127 nations? Even more complicated by David's question. She didn't even want this and she didn't even ask for it. Why does this all of a sudden make sense in terms of the Midrash?
She's the Gilgul of Sarah.
If every single year of those 127 counted, if every single day, the way we explained before, also in the name of Zohar Kadosh, every single day that Sarah was alive, she looked at it as a challenge. She looked at it as a mission, a goal. Something had to be achieved, something had to be fulfilled. This is maybe part of the reward for the efforts that she made, the devotion that she had in each and every one of those 127 years that are counted out, they're enumerated as 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. All of a sudden it starts to make sense. Esther didn't ask for this. She wasn't bargaining for it. In fact, if it were up to her, she wouldn't have taken it. But part of the zechut of Sarah happens to be that it's paid back in such a way that it leaves a little bit of a trace, like a signature. If you want to know why 127 nations, which has no significance, and we could care less how many nations it is, dig a little bit deeper and you'll see this is the reward for someone who made efforts over the course of 127 years. As if to say it's one nation per year that she lived as a tzedekit. Interesting enough. A few other details, because these things are always deeper than it appears at first glance. If Rabbi Akiva was looking to get his students awake, there must have been something else going on.
Rabbi, but if she is, so I mean, I don't know if I said that or you said that. Like, she said that he's the Gilgul of Sarah in a way. But what do we say that she comes back to fix? That what was wrong with Sarah that we need to come back to fix?
Very good question. I made a slight reference to it before, where sometimes a nefesh comes back, or a neshama comes back to Olam Hazeh, not because they need Olam Hazeh, because Olam Hazeh needs them.
Okay.
So tzaddikim, nevi'im, these are people that maybe come because we.
So if they do something wrong during that Gilgul, they pretty much lost
They
it.
could potentially, right? They could potentially get in trouble. Yeah.
Then maybe they don't have to come back again.
In theory, perhaps under more complicated circumstances.
If that's the case, in the case of Esther, is even more of like a, I mean, irony. The fact that she comes back and she goes through all this, like, it's not that she comes back and she has it easy, right? So she doesn't need to come back. We made her come back because we need her, and we gave her so much trouble.
Here's an interesting question: is there any analog in Sarah's life to what happened with Achashverosh?
Of course, with the Pharaoh, and with
Avimelech.
Avimelech, right?
Happened twice.
Right.
That she's taken by force by someone else, and then has to be somehow miraculously released from it. In other words, this also is a bizarre coincidence if you look at it that way. So there's a certain aspect of this. How does it happen? Anything else that you can think of in terms of similarities and why was she taken by force? And by the way, these are two kings, right? Paro is Melech Mitzrayim, Avimelech is Melech Perishtim, king of the Perishtim.
There is also called, it's not that already, but there is a dream to Avimelech, there's a dream to
the dream that saves her from him.
It's in a way it's also a dream.
The dream that eventually saves the entire nation from Han. What unique feature of Sarah made it? She's described as an exceptionally beautiful woman, as is Esther. So her physical beauty, not only spiritual beauty, but also physical beauty, in a way that's compelling. I don't know if Sarah was the most beautiful woman of her generation. Could be she was.
I thought it wasn't beauty, it was more like grace. That everybody loved being in her company. She was a
right. Very interesting. I meant to ask.
I'm more for you, beauty, Rabbi. You know that.
Right, of course.
But
the fashion industry of the Persian Empire. Well, the tapestry and rugs, carpets, they have an appreciation for certain things. I meant to ask Rav Ritby, let me see if I remember, I'll email him. I wanted to know if he remembers the word that Rav Ashkenazi used to translate hen, he was very adamant about translations. So the word hen, what does it mean? Maybe grace. I don't know how else to. Maybe I don't know that there's a word in the Torah for elegance.
I heard
I know that we have a Hebrew word for.
I heard a
for
shiur from him about this term, but I can't remember all the details now. Yeah. From the recordings.
Because it's a beautiful midrash that compares this. If we had time, maybe we would do this too. But Noach and Esther. So there's a page that says, "V'Noach matzachen b'nei Hashem." Why was he matzachen? Either because he's a tzaddik, so he finds favor in the eyes of Hashem, or you can say his generation was terrible. He wasn't a tzaddik, but relative to his generation, there was something about him worth saving. As if to say, even if he wasn't a perfect tzaddik, this is what made Hashem desire less to destroy him along with everyone else. And the same Midrash says by Esther, she had a green complexion, olive green, dark. Apparently at the time, a dark complexion was considered unattractive. So it's not that she was so physically beautiful; it's that there was something beyond her beauty that. Or her beauty was accentuated by something more than physical. So what other components can you contribute to beauty to make it this way? Elegance, grace, something about her was went beyond that. So it's interesting. So Sarah is a tzaddiket. She also lost her parents young, by the way, lost her father. She's raised by Abraham, who ends up marrying her, which is also all of a sudden starting to make a little bit more sense. She's extremely physically beautiful, as well as being very tznu'ah and very righteous. She lives a very fulfilling and very accomplished 127 years, and all of a sudden that number magically reappears by Esther, who finds herself in similar situations. So, it's a very deep concept that has a lot of potential for misunderstanding. So you have to be careful when we're not prophets, we're not mikubalim, we're not on the level that we can point at someone and say, you belong here, and you're this, and you're a gilgul of this, you're a tikkun of that. Story that I'll never forget because it's very ingrained in my memory. We were in Fairlawn. There was a woman, she was divorced, she had 3 kids. She was an amateur drug addict. And her son came to the house one night, Friday night, hysterical, screaming, you have to come, you have to come. What happened? My mother's gone crazy. So she was flying on ecstasy, acid, somewhere, a combination of the two. And she decided that her daughter was Rahav, that her Guatemalan housekeeper was Gilgul or she was Rahav, and that her son was Yoshua. She started rattling off these crazy, predictions for. She probably went to the Kabbalah Center for a session or two and decided that's it. She understands the Shemot and she can just, tag names onto them. I mean, you have to be very, very careful with this concept. The reason that I bring it up, and the reason that it's something that is very important, is precisely because the Gemara itself gives you an explanation with this key of the Arizal that helps make an awful lot of sense out of things. We can't point at someone and say, I know why he or she is being punished. Knowing that there's such a thing as, out of mercy, having your punishment meted out to you over the course of an additional lifetime so that it's not held over your head for all eternity, makes these situations a lot easier to digest. Now, as I'll describe different people coming back in different circumstances, situations. I'll give you one famous story, but these are the kind that are fun to tell over Seudat Purim. The Arizal was walking with his Talmidim in Tzfat, and the Pacha, the Turkish ruler who was in charge of the Ottoman Empire at the time, ruling over Tzfat, he happens to ride by, and he's on his horse, and he has some servants that are walking by foot, and he sees the Arizal and his Talmidim, and apparently he made some kind of a face. So the Arizal right away says to his Talmidim, hang on a second, sit tight. First the Pacha says to him, is there any Jew who owes you money? So he says, yes, in fact there was this mamzer, such and such, ben so-and-so, who had, was he borrowed money? It was a tax assessment or something that he refused to pay. Money that he was late on. Anyway, he didn't pay it. He said, and he passed away a number of months ago. So Rizal says, no problem. He goes back and he convenes the Talmidim and he says, guys, do me a favor. Each and every one of you has to get as much money as you can right now. We're going to pay this guy's debt. Okay, so they go get the money. The Rav said so. The Rav said so. They hand over the money to the pacha. His horse takes a few more steps and it dies. It collapses and then eventually just dies. It can't be saved. He explains to Talmidim after they distance themselves a little bit that this guy who owed money to the pacha legitimately didn't pay it. He caused the Chilul Hashem, and in order to repay his debt, he came back as a horse doing difficult work until the amount of time, the salaried hours were to expire, at which point his nefesh would be free to benefit from Olam Haba, what he deserved. So he said, we can do a pidyon, we can actually redeem this punishment and help make it shorter by paying what the guy.
But we're not here. Like I'm very ambitious, but at this point we're not the Arizal.
Right. So you have to know your limitations.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Just to backtrack into what it is that Rabbi Akiva was telling his Talmidim to begin with. First of all, if he's telling them something that they already know, or something that's simple and easy to figure out, they wouldn't be impressed. He's teaching them something very, very profound, something very deep, very difficult to understand, very abstract, and his expectation is this will perk them up. They'll start to get curious about it. They'll start to wake up. On a slightly more abstract level, Zohar Kadosh itself says that the concepts that are described in it are so powerful that they have the power to force the Geulah to come out of Rahamim and not out of Din, meaning that we can bring the Geulah in a happy, positive, ideal kind of scenario, as opposed to bringing it about unideally as a result of despair or punishment or a generation that's so pathetic it can't get itself together. Like it was in Egypt, we have no choice but to be redeemed. So the depth of the concepts, the power that they have, the perspective that it gives you, the motivation, the inspiration that this can give you to do the right thing, to realize that there's a very long run when it comes to how you gauge your actions and rewards and punishments. These things are a lot more sophisticated than you think. The calculations are a lot more precise than we'd like to believe. And although one-dimensional perspective of Olam Hazeh, you lived your life, you got away with whatever you got away with, and rewards and punishments, it seems like it's almost haphazard or by accident. It's actually a lot more precise than you think. It just may be that it didn't happen over the course of one particular lifetime. That's all. That's it. That's all the Arizal wants to tell you. Everything is precise. Everything is 100% milligram for milligram. The only catch is that you can't make any predictions or any prescriptions or any assumptions based on anyone's current situation as it stands. There's a gap between what you do and what happens to you, and this gap can go over one lifetime or even many. And so Rasha ben Tzaddik, I don't even know what lifetime he might be benefiting from, that he still has zichuyot, and for which he's still being paid, so to speak. It's chaval that he's wasting it here. But if he was doing something productive with it, you could say, fine, he's not wasting it. He has a lot of wealth, but he gives tzedakah, he does good things with it, so would it be coming out of his merits? A tzaddik ben Rasha, chances are it doesn't go back all that far, but you could see someone who lives a life of total piety, and who nonetheless suffers. And he has it bad, and you would be inclined to say, well, if that's what happens to people who observe the Torah and the mitzvot, why would I subject myself to the same torture and to the same torment? And the answer is, look, if this guy is suffering, who are you to even say that it's because of something he did now? Maybe the guy's imperfect. Chances are that he is. And second of all, even if he is perfect, it could well be this is something that predates him, it precedes him. You don't know what you might have done wrong in the previous lifetime. For all I know, he was accountable. Now he looks like a decent guy. He sits next to me at Minyan. Sometimes he prays too loud, but nothing out of the ordinary that would justify the punishments that looks like he's getting. So Rabbi Akiva, I'll remind you, is the Rav of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. In other words, the author of Zohar Kadosh learned by him. He was one of his second classes of students.
By the way, we don't know who are the students here. We don't know if it's the first generation of students or the second.
No idea. We have no idea. It could well be that he was teaching things that even Rabbi Shimon found difficult to me. Who am I to say? But he had a certain depth to him. And obviously he inspired Talmidim, certainly in the case of Rabbi Shimon, to find the deeper meaning of the Torah and the mitzvot. One more word on this topic, because it ties in very nicely to the entire holiday of Purim, and that is that Esther, the name itself, has the etymology of lehastir, seter, which means hidden, that which is beyond you. The name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is hidden in the Megillah. The hand of Hashem is very hidden throughout the Megillah. There's no overt, direct, explicit mention of Hashem. It's all, everything happens in a kind of mysterious, secretive way. And on top of all of this, we have this mitzvah of drinking on Purim, right? And the famous expression in the Gemara is Nechnas yain yatsa sod, that drinking is a way to intoxicate yourself. Either it makes you a blabbering imbecile, you can drool all over yourself and have a good time the way many cultures in the world do, or the drinking can help you loosen your thought processes a little bit, overcome some of your typical restrictions and limitations, free your mind a little bit to think about concepts that are deeper, more abstract, things, to appreciate things that normally we have a little bit of difficulty being receptive towards, a little bit of aversity to abstract, mystical concepts. So it happens to fit not only within the construct of Esther and the relationship between her and Sarah, but the Megillah in general happens to have an awful lot of meaning, an awful lot of depth, and a lot of lessons to teach us, even though the name of Hashem doesn't appear in it, and it really reads more like a story than it does proverbs or prophecy or anything of the sort. And yet, ironically and kind of mysteriously, there are a lot of very deep messages hidden in the Megillah that that are revealed through depth, through study, and through analysis. So I will leave you guys be for tonight. B'ez Hashem, we have Tani Testera tomorrow, and the